Recently, we got some street news about imaginary star DeWanda Wise gearing up to battle Chauncey the teddy bear. She also shared some thoughts on getting more involved behind the scenes as an executive producer for the film. DeWanda mentioned that scary sequel ideas for Imaginary were actually discussed on set, including some from her 10-year-old co-star Pyper Braun. Here's everything we know about Imaginary 2. Before we jump into Imaginary 2 and what DeWanda Wise thinks about the sequel, let's break down Chauncey's origins in Imaginary, because most of us didn't fully get it after watching the first movie. While kids and their imaginary friends typically grow apart naturally, things can get tricky when the bond is severed unnaturally. In Imaginary, Chauncey isn't just any teddy bear. He's actually an imaginary friend from a place called Never Ever. Jessica's therapist shows her a recording of Alice's therapy session, and she realizes she's been hallucinating the bear all along. Rewatching the video, Jessica connects that Chauncey was her own imaginary friend when she was a kid. It turns out that these imaginary friends are spirits that attach to kids at a young age and form a close bond. When that bond is broken, like when Jessica had to move away from her home, the spirits can turn a bit nasty. Sticking with the topic, let's talk about Imaginary's Alice in Wonderland references. At first glance, they might seem random, but they're actually there because both stories explore how real imagination can be for kids. Alice, in Imaginary, forms an emotional bond with Chauncey, who's supposed to be a made-up character. Even though Alice is smart, she still shows her immaturity when she's pressured into activities that go against her morals and desires, just like the Alice in both Lewis Carroll's story and Disney's animated version. In Imaginary, the characters get way too absorbed in a fantasy at the cost of reality. Unlike the happy children's tale, Imaginary takes that childlike wonder and imagination to a much darker place. Both Chauncey and Never Ever are real in the movie, unlike Wonderland in Lewis Carroll's story. Plus, Never Ever might seem beautiful to Alice, but it's a place of nightmares for anyone who tries to mess with Chauncey's wishes. And if characters get hurt in Never Ever, those injuries stay with them when they come back to the real world, so there's a clear line between the two stories. Now, let's chat about whether Imaginary 2 could happen, what we know so far, and any potential sequel hints. Given the mixed reviews from critics and audiences, Imaginary 2 seems pretty likely. The Google reviews are pretty split. There's no post-credit scene because the movie wrapped up its story neatly, making another one with the same main characters unnecessary. That said, there's one moment at the end that might suggest a sequel could be possible. After burning down their house, Jessica, Alice, and Taylor check into a hotel and spot a bear peeking over a chair, just like a kid playing with his stuffed animal. They decide to leave the place, but the kid mentions his bear Rufus being hungry. This was a defining trait of Chauncey, suggesting that the spirit could stick around in a different bear. While it's reasonable to think Chauncey can't be completely vanquished, this scene feels more like it ties into the movie's theme of childhood trauma rather than setting up a direct sequel. Jessica, Alice, and Taylor might have moved past their trauma, but that doesn't mean others can't face similar experiences. We'll just have to wait and see if Imaginary leads to a sequel. Oh, and just to add, DeWanda Wise hinted in an interview with Variety that there could be more Chauncey stories. She mentioned a potential coda involving a missing child, maybe a sibling of Liam, suggesting that the story could continue. She even joked that she might need to sit down with Jeff to get writing. To expand on this in a potential Imaginary 2, the story could dive deeper into the psychological and emotional stakes introduced in the first film. The end of the original Imaginary really sets up a fascinating premise where the characters have to confront the darker aspects of their own minds and imaginations. In Imaginary 2, we could explore the aftermath of Jessica getting stuck in Never Ever. This sequel could emphasize how imagination can be both a blessing and a curse. Just as Chauncey manipulates the environment to his advantage, Jessica's own mind could become a battleground where she struggles to distinguish between fantasy and reality. The movie could dive into themes of memory, trauma, and perception, questioning whether escaping the clutches of an imaginary friend is as much about overcoming personal demons as it is about physical survival. The film could also deepen the connection between the characters, Jessica, Alice, and Taylor, showing how they rely on each other to break free from Chauncey's control. As they continue to face challenges within Never Ever, the stakes could become higher, forcing them to confront their fears and the limits of their own imagination. We could see more interactions with other imaginary friends who have different agendas and potentially even explore the origins of these entities further. This could create opportunities for more intense psychological horror elements and greater character development. Additionally, Imaginary 2 could explore new doors and thresholds between the real world and Never Ever, hinting at other potential ways characters could enter or leave the imaginative realm. This could create suspense and uncertainty, keeping audiences engaged and questioning how much control characters really have over their fates. With the right balance of psychological depth and horror, this sequel could really expand on the themes of the original movie, taking them to new, darker, and more complex places. Imaginary is a movie with multiple layers that can sometimes feel overwhelming and complex, but its ending delivers a powerful message. Things can improve even when they seem bad. Chauncey and the trauma he symbolizes may persist, but the trio, Jessica, Alice, and Taylor, don't have to let it define their lives. They quite literally sever their connection to the pain and suffering that Chauncey brought at the end of Imaginary, allowing them to move forward and heal together. Blumhouse's Imaginary had a solid week 2 performance, competing with their hit from earlier in the year, Megan. The new horror film, co-written and directed by Jeff Wadlow, follows Jessica as she navigates her new marriage and the sinister presence of her stepdaughter Alice's old teddy bear, Chauncey. Despite a 44.4% drop in its second weekend, much smaller than the typical 50% or more drop for horror movies, Imaginary still faces some challenges if it hopes to replicate Megan's success, which grossed $180 million worldwide. While Imaginary might not reach that level of blockbuster status, it's not considered a failure for Blumhouse. The movie's estimated budget of $10 to $12 million means it needs to hit around $24 million to break even, and it's nearly there with its current domestic box office performance. If it can maintain this kind of hold over the coming weeks, Imaginary could still turn a tidy profit even if it doesn't become an outright smash hit. This solid performance not only proves the potential for a sequel, but also provides valuable feedback for exploring deeper themes and continuing the narrative. A follow-up film could delve into the implications of never fully escaping childhood trauma, and how imagination shapes our perception of reality, potentially expanding the story and deepening the lore of Chauncey's origins and his impact on the characters. This foundation gives Imaginary 2 the opportunity to be even more nuanced and compelling, tapping into the rich emotional core established in the original film. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below.